Okay, in the last video, we stopped here in that section 8.3, and section 8.3 is called Drug Substance Manufacturing, and you were like, what does that even mean, Tracy? I don't know what that means. Okay, well, that's fine. It's manufacturing, which means making, and the drug substance is all about the API, which is active pharmaceutical ingredient. I hope you know what that abbreviation is going to be, because that should be like the final question on a final exam. It should just only be this question, maybe. What does API mean? And that means active pharmaceutical ingredient. If you get that wrong, you automatically fail the class. That's how I should be running this. All right, so a drug substance, or other words called API. So, drug substance is really the term that's used for people like the FDA. Ooh, look at me, I'm working for the FDA, and I'll dress in a suit and a tie, and I'll visit your site, and I'm going to do some inspections, and I'm going to tell you what you're doing wrong so I can write you up. Okay, well, that's the FDA's way of referring it to a drug substance. They call it a drug substance. Okay, well, fine. All right, if that's the case, no one else really calls it the drug substance. We don't want to be the FDA. We don't want to be the people in the suit, so we're going to use our own cool kid lingo, and that lingo is going to be the API, or active pharmaceutical ingredient. So this is actually what is commonly used out there in the manufacturing world. We're talking about the API. We've mentioned the API over and over and over and over and over in all of these lecture modules, but keep in mind, formal reporting, formal kind of records and those types of things, especially if they are in correspondence to the FDA, will refer to this as the drug substance, because this is actually the molecule or the special little thing inside of these medications that we are taking that gets it to do the job that we are trying to get it to do. So API, or active pharmaceutical ingredient. Let's read what they say in 21 CFR. Okay, well, 21 CFR. Drug substance is an active ingredient. That's why we call it the API. That is intended to furnish pharmacological activity or other direct effect in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease, or to affect the structure or any function of the human body, but does not include intermediates used in the synthesis of that ingredient. All right, so what this is kind of in the final form. This is kind of what we're after, and it is in the final form what we end up with. This is kind of it, folks. I mean, we have made the active pharmaceutical ingredient. Sure, there's things that went into place. Sure, there's things that we mixed together. Absolutely, there's stuff that we did in order to clean that final product up. Whatever type of steps that those went through, that is dependent on the manufacturing process. But all of those intermediates, everything along the course of the way, those are not going to be the active pharmaceutical ingredient. That does not count. That does not matter, because what we're hoping to end up with here is a pure product. And that pure product is going to be the API, and that is the major workforce that is going to happen inside of these medications that's going to get it to do the job that we are prescribing, that a doctor is going to prescribe it for you for. All right, so that is the definition of an API, or a drug substance. And when we make these APIs, we want to make sure that certain things are operating and doing what they're supposed to do. And in the manufacturing process, there's different stages that have to happen here. I mean, we're using big pieces of equipment. We're using big bioreactors and chromatography columns and centrifuges and filters and all kinds of stuff, right? So, of course, there's a thought process that has to be in place here. And that thought process is all of the qualifications that you see on the, what are your qualifications to the job? Okay, well, what are the qualifications that machine brings to the table? I mean, what kind of training did it have? What type of education did it have? I mean, where did it go to school? What was its GPA? Hey, centrifuge, it looks like you got a 2.0 GPA. Why did you do that for, centrifuge? I need to know what your problem was. Okay, well, no one's going to be asking those types of questions, but for equipment and for manufacturing purposes, these pieces of equipment need to be able to do a job, and we've got to qualify them in order to do the job and to be used. And there's 4 stages of qualification here. So the first one is a design qualification. The second one is installation. The third one is operational. And the fourth one is performance. So all of these different steps in that order, most of the time, have to be taken into consideration. And they have to be performed and they have to be documented before these pieces of equipment can actually be used in the manufacturing line. So let's kind of start with the first and just work ourselves through, and we can give nice little abbreviations sometimes if we want to. But the very first one is a design qualification. So if I'm in the facility and if I'm trying to make this API, well, I'm going to, again, be using equipment. Okay, where did that even come from? Like, okay, my job all day long is the centrifuge. Where did that centrifuge come from? Right? It had to come from somebody. I mean, I just didn't make it out in the garage and bring it in one day. That's not how this works. So the design qualification is really for the manufacturers of that particular type of equipment. So whoever made that centrifuge, they sold me the centrifuge because they told me that it can do stuff. And that stuff is what I wanted. That's why I bought it. It's like buying a computer, for goodness sakes. So, okay, you go to the Walmart and you're like, I need a computer. And then you look at all these computers and you see one for $100 and you're like, hey, that's the computer that I want. And you don't know anything about it. Why are you even purchasing it if you don't know anything about it? What if that computer can only check email? I mean, come on now. That is a design flaw. You are getting ready to order a piece of equipment or pay for a piece of equipment that is not going to do the job that you need it to do. So why would you go through that mess? Why would you go, you're going to return it? Okay, now think about tens of thousands of dollars invested into one piece of equipment. And that one piece of equipment is supposed to do a job, and that job has to be the job that we want it to do. So design qualification is this idea that there's got to be documents involved. Okay, there's got to be proof, there's got to be evidence that the design of that piece of equipment is going to be suitable for what I want. Okay, so I need a computer that I can download Microsoft Office on. That's all that I care about. I need Microsoft Office, so that includes Word and Excel and PowerPoint, so I can make wonderful presentations like this one. Okay, well, if that's the only thing that I need, then I can have a lot of different choices that are going to go out there and that I can kind of pick and choose from, because all of these are, quote, suitable for the intended use. That is the design qualification. So that manufacturer that made that computer better give me a printout, and that printout better tell me what that instrument is capable of doing. And I want to double check that, and I want to make sure that that actually makes sense for what we need. Okay, so if I've got a computer, and let's say that I am a big gamer, and let's say that I go in and I am playing these, I mean, my computers get so hot that smoke comes out of the back end. Okay, so I need a new computer, and I need a computer that's going to kind of be fast enough and quick enough and download things, so that way I don't have to worry about the sluggishness that goes on inside of my computer while I'm trying to use it. Okay, well, that is a little bit more specific. So again, I need a design qualification document, and this is a document. It is proof in the pudding and evidence that says this is what this machine can do for you. Does it meet your expectations? Does it do what you're looking for? If so, then this can be used for your intended use. That is exactly what design qualification is all about. So design qualification will often happen first, and this is going to happen mainly from the manufacturer of that piece of equipment that has made it, that has designed it, that has told you it can do the job that you are after. So that is very important documentation. That documentation has to be filed. That documentation has to be kept by, guess who? The receivers, because the receivers are going to be getting the equipment. So of course they're going to have to kind of file it away, document it, and make it get organized. Next up, after we figure out, okay, well, what's computer's good for me, then I'm going to have to come home and I'm going to have to install it. Okay, well, that means I got to get it out of the box. I got to plug it up. I got to connect the monitor to the hardware, to the mouse, to the keyboard, and to the tower, whatever the case is. I need to install it the proper way. And then I need to push the power button. And if I push the power button and my computer turns on, great, that is wonderful. That is what installation qualification is all about. So when I order, and this often comes second, when I order the instrument and it arrives, installation qualification is often going to be done. And this is called IQ. That is the abbreviation that we use for that, because very often we are present. We see this happening. So even in the laboratory setting, if in the analytical lab, for you Chemtech people and your biotech people and so forth, if you're in the lab and you're working and there's a new instrument that was ordered and that instrument comes and arrives in a box, then that instrument manufacturer will often show up and they will install that piece of equipment for you. So they're going to get it out of the box. They're going to connect all of the cords, all of the cables, all of the tubing that needs to go on inside that machine. They're going to put it all together and they're going to turn the on button on, and that's going to be the installation qualification. So this is, again, documented evidence that something has happened. It is proof that something took place. And what we're looking for here is we want to make sure it's installed and that it meets the manufacturer or the user requirements. So very often in the installation qualification, when they connect this equipment up for you after they install it, they're going to just go through a series of self-checks. And these self-checks are going to be like, okay, our monitor comes on, our tower comes on, I get power from these areas, my mouse works, my keyboard works, and we've connected it to a printer. Okay, all of that is installation qualification. And there's often things that I can check off on a box to say, yep, that's happening, yep, that's working, absolutely, that's working too. Does it show a green light on the monitor? It does, so I'm going to check that off. Does it show a green power light on your tower? It does, so I'm going to check that off as well. That is installation qualification. That's how I want you to think about this. All right, so design qualification, the company's made something to certain standards, and that's appropriate for me, so I'll order it. That comes in, so people are going to come in and they're going to install this piece of equipment, whatever that equipment might be. Again, it could be bioreactors for all I care. It does not matter. It's a piece of equipment. So they're going to install that bioreactor, or they're going to install something else that you're using, like a drum filter or whatever the case might be, and they are doing some self-checks to make sure it does look okay, like everything's working according to plan. Next up is the operational qualification. So they will often abbreviate this OQ. So now I've got IQ that happens first and then OQ that happens after this. So operational qualification is the idea, again, there's got to be documented evidence. So there's got to be paperwork. There's got to be a paper trail. I've got to be able to document it, file it away, so that way people can see this if they need to see it. And this is a little bit more specific. So what's happening here is that the equipment or system, whatever that they have come in and they have just installed it, now we are going a little bit closer, and I think the key word here is to the intended use. And it is honing in on the operational limits of what we want. Okay, so if I need a computer that is a certain speed, there's probably a website or something that I can go to and I can check the speed of my computer. That is one of the reasons that we ordered it. So I now know it turns on. I now know that it does the basics. So my thing was speed. I need to make sure the speed is there. So we go and we do a self-check and we run a test, and that test is trying to figure out how fast my computer can run and keep up. All right, well, I'm going to get a report from that, and that report is the operational qualification. This is what I wanted. This is the specific things that we're doing with it, and this is what I'm after. So please prove to me that it can do those things, because you told me it could when you sold it to me. So this is the operational qualification that's happening here. All right, so in a laboratory setting, my machine would come in, they would install it, they would make sure it's working, it's all talking, it's communicating, and then if they're like, okay, well, what did you plan to do with this piece of instrumentation, Tracy? I'm going to go, well, these are the things that we're going to be doing with it, and then they're going to inject a sample, and that sample is going to be very similar to what I am trying to do with that machine, and they're going to go, okay, this is not exactly what you want, but it is similar to what you want, and this is proving to you that this machine can do that separation that you were after, or that analysis that you were after. That is what the operational qualification is all about. So IQ and OQ, and then the next one is going to be the PQ, and the PQ is often last, and that's number 4, and this is going to be performance qualification. So this is how it is performing. So again, documented evidence, because I'm going to have to file these. People are going to want to look at them. They're going to want to make sure that these things were checked off before we began using them for any purpose at all, both on the manufacturing side and on the laboratory testing side. And this is letting me know, hey, the equipment works, all of the attachments work, everything's connected together, everything's doing what you want it to do. And in addition to that, we have done things over and over and over on it to show you what the reproducibility is. So that means if I am ordering a piece of equipment, there's going to be multiple sample runs that's going to be done on that piece of equipment. And every single sample run, I hope, is going to end up with the same type of data. It's going to show me the same result over and over and over and over. So the reproducibility is going to be a thing here, because that is related to performance. How is it performing in a daily type of routine based on what we're trying to do with that piece of equipment? And again, it can be an analytical piece of instrumentation in a laboratory setting, or it can be a big centrifuge. I can kind of figure out, okay, how is it spinning? How fast is it spinning? Let's spin some things multiple times. Let's just make sure that it's performing the appropriate way before you take off and leave. Because if I don't do the IQ, OQ, PQ before that installer takes off and out of here, and I'll never see them again, what's going to happen if I try to use that piece of equipment like that centrifuge and it just fails, or it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing? That is a problem, and that can stall the entire production line or the laboratory testing line if we are not very careful. There's also something that we call process performance qualification, and this is called PPQ. And PPQ is a set of what they call full-scale production batches. So now that everything is in place, now that all of my equipment is on the production side of the house, it is operating, it's performing, we've done checkoffs on all of those. This is like a full-blown batch that gets made. And this is just testing everything to make sure that things are going to go according to plan. That is what a process performance qualification, or PPQ, is all about. It is full scale, it is all production from step 1 all the way to the very end. And this is a way that we can double check that we can do the job that we set out to do. So we have made the pharmaceutical product according to plan, and because of that, they will very often call this a validation batch. So this is not intended to be used. This is not intended to be sold. Most of the time, it is just a batch that we are testing everything that's going to be involved in the manufacturing line. All right. So we got to do that before we actually make real batches, and those real batches are then going to be sold or, shipped off, bottled up, done whatever with, and it's eventually going to reach into the hands of the consumer. But we've got to do a test drive first. It's like going to a car lot. You're going to do a test drive before you buy it. So this is your test drive to make sure things are basically spinning the wheels, and it can drive, and it can go in reverse, and the windows roll up and down, and the locks work. So that is exactly what we're looking for here, and that is a validation batch. Notice my scribbles on this previous slide. There is a slight difference between what we call validation and qualification. Just a little kind of tidbit of information. A qualification step is really now intended for equipment. So we are qualifying equipment to do a certain job. We are qualifying the installation. We are qualifying the operation. We are qualifying the performance. That is the terminology that we use for those processes. So it is specifically assigned to equipment nowadays. That is the lingo. That's how we refer to it. There is also something called a validation, though, and that is very similar, except we are validating processes. So the steps that we are taking, the mixings and the blendings and all of those individual steps that make that product work, those processes are getting validated, whereas equipment is getting qualified. Is it qualified to do that job? Yes or no? You're already qualified, right? They hired you. You went through training. You're following an SOP. You are qualified to do the job. Why do we need to qualify you again? That is why we don't use that term with the steps that you are involved in. So if you are doing something in the manufacturing line and you're following an SOP, any type of activity along the life cycle from when it starts to when it stops, those processes in the SOPs that you are following are going to be validated processes, meaning these have been tested and those processes work. So if I am in the chromatography section and I'm going to be separating things, that has been validated. It is a process that has been validated. We know it works. Someone has done it before multiple times and it's always worked out. So it should work out for you too when you do it. The chromatography instrument, though, that instrument is going to be qualified, not validated. You have validated the process, but the equipment that's used in that is going to be qualified. So we have qualified it to do the job just like you have been qualified to do the job when you were hired with HR. All right. So that is the idea of a PPQ. Again, it's the idea of let's make a batch and let's just see if things are going to work out according to plan. So that way we can kind of fix any mistakes that begin to happen before we actually turn the on button on and do this thing for real. Critical quality attributes is also another term that we like to use that is abbreviated with a CQA. And CQA, critical quality attributes, is a product that has a certain job to do, and those are the attributes that we're talking about, and that is essential for its function. So if the CQA is not in the approved range, then the product is not going to be deemed as usable. So a product is going to work the way that it's going to work based on its chemical structure. That's really what this is kind of all about. So how does the thing do its job and what makes it do that job? So for instance, if I take a look at a little molecule of aspirin. All right, so I've got a little molecule of aspirin. It's made a certain way. It has a certain chemical structure. It's got a certain chemical compound that's associated with it, right? So because of that, that is carrying a certain attribute, and the way that is, the way that will react, the way that will perform in my body is the way that this molecule or this drug will actually end up working. So that is a certain attribute that is essential for its function and its intended use. So in the aspirin production, what would happen is that they will give me a range, and that range will be a percentage. So I will get, okay, if I'm going to do this as a marketable drug, then I want this stuff pure, and I want that aspirin to be within this range. And this is the CQA that's not in the approved range. So if it falls below that value or above that value, we are not going to use it. We can't market it. We can't take it any further. There's also critical process parameters. These are called CPPs, critical process parameters. And these are all the things that are happening in the production line that affects the CQAs. So the way that that drug behaves, well, I am going to play a role in that. And if I do my processing job the wrong way, then I am going to mess with that attribute that it brings to the table. And I'm beginning to do things to it that is going to change it up if I'm not careful and if I don't catch those mistakes. So those ranges have to be kept in place. If it goes below or if it goes above, then this is going to be a problem, and I need to fix those problems before it makes matters worse. And I give you a few examples here. So the finished product pH, this is what the consumer will see. That pH of that product is going to really depend on what I'm doing on the manufacturing side of the house. Am I controlling the pH? Am I making sure that I'm monitoring it and seeing if it's too acidic or if it's too basic? And am I doing anything actively to prevent that from happening? I should be, because SOPs are in place when these things begin to go wrong. But at the same time, if I'm not doing my job the right way, I'm affecting the finished product, and that finished product might not work anymore based on what I have done with it in the processing line. Next up, product impurities are going to be influenced by these parameters. So if I'm not making sure that I'm tracking the minimals and the maximums of these things, and I begin to do my processing work and my manufacturing work, then what I'm actually doing the risk of is creating impurities. I'm not getting rid of the impurities. I might be creating more impurities instead. And I don't want those impurities in the final product form, because that is what the consumer is eventually going to see. And that all relies on me following an SOP and doing my job the proper way. So, some of these examples, mixing too hard. You can actually damage that material. You can damage the intended use of that. If I don't take care of dissolved oxygen, dissolved oxygen is going to be good in the beginning in the upstream area of the processes, but as this material makes it more downstream, we get a problem. And the reason is because that DO, that dissolved oxygen, can actually react with some of these APIs that we are after. And that DO, if it reacts with the API, can inactivate it, or it can create impurities because it's destroying things that are present that are there. And I don't want those impurities, and I don't want a deactivated form of an API because it's not going to do its job that it's intended to do. So DO levels, very important. That again is relying on the processing and the manufacturing side of the house to do their job the proper way. Next up, solution temperature. All right, well, if I don't control that in the ranges of where it should be, if it's too cold or if it's too hot, then again, I can create a problem. And that problem, if it's too hot or if it's too cold, can break down the API. And that API is what I'm after, and I don't want to destroy it. So that is why following the SOPs are very important. I need to make sure that I pay attention to all of these values into the set points, and if those begin to get out of line, what can I do to fix that problem as quickly as possible? Because we do get issues with that type of material if I'm not very careful. The drug substance manufacturing, or the API, folks, this is just a review of what you've already seen, right? So the API is the stuff that I'm after, and we talked about that already multiple times, and the processes have to be validated. So IQ, OQ, PQs are going to have to be there. They're going to have to be in place. You now know what those are. The upstream and the downstream process can be a thing. So the upstream is actually making the active molecule that we are after. And again, it could be small molecules, so we're synthesizing that ourselves, or it could be biomolecules where something else living is making that product for us. And then the downstream manufacturing side is all about the cleanup. It's all about the purification. So in the very beginnings of many modules ago, you've seen fermenters and bioreactors, and we talked about those. And then we said, hey, we need a harvest and recovery. So we need to get rid of those cells. We don't want those to carry on. We want to purify this a little bit at least and get that medium out of there. So when we get the medium out of there, we begin the process of purification. And this is really where downstream begins to happen. So if we start the purification steps here, whatever that might be, those purification steps are going to be coming into play. This is the downstream manufacturing. So we are making sure it is as clean as it can be, and we are regarding the API for that reason. Then the API is eventually going to go to formulation. We'll talk about that later in the lecture module, and then sterilization, and then fill finish, and so forth. So each one of these sectors are going to get its own little time before this lecture module is going to be over. But again, just a very quick review of what we are talking about in the manufacturing lineup, and really specifically here, the APIs. So now you know that in the purification steps, all of that requires equipment. In the upstream, all of that requires equipment. That equipment has to be qualified. We've got to go through, we've got to look at all of the design elements, the installation elements, the operational, the procedural elements, all of those, the processing, everything has to go on, and it's got to be qualified before we are allowed to use those pieces and parts in our manufacturing type of setup. All right, so once those begin to happen, the upstream will make the API for us. That API is going to be cleaned up in the downstream processes that begin to take place, and then eventually we'll go to formulation, which we will talk about in the upcoming videos. All right, so I'm going to stop there. In the next video, we're going to pick up after this slide. We're going to talk more about the biomanufacturing process and look at more details. Details? Oh my gosh, there's more? Yeah, there is.